Hey, this video is for Brad Batchelor. Brad, hoping to convey how I would have your system hooked up if it was my system with your M106 and your 234 and your effects and your computer. Um, so hopefully this is helpful. I'm hoping it doesn't confuse you more. I've had like an hour and a half sleep in the last 36 hours, so I'm not sure how well this is going to come across. But at any rate, this is how I would have things hooked up. I don't own a 234 anymore, but I do have spare parts. So there's the back panel and the faceplate, and that will represent the back and the front of our 234. I have a mono compressor here. You indicated you're using one of those. Have a clapped out Alesis MIDI verb here to just represent multi-effects, and an old laptop to represent the PC that we're pretending is playing back GarageBand and also acting as our master recorder and our M106. So the reason this isn't necessarily straightforward with the M106 and the 234 is because we're asking some relatively simple devices, as nice as they are, to do some nominally complex tasks. And it really comes down to dealing with the area of monitoring. Normally on a multi-bus mixer where you've got multiple inputs that can be assigned to multiple outputs, normally on maybe a more complex, bigger mixer, our monitor section would be built around individual monitor sends off of each output, each program group, and having a little more flexibility and control over what we're monitoring, and being able to set up a monitor mix off our outputs. The M106 actually has for the type of mixer, the size mixer it is, has a really nice monitor section. But it still really limits this mixer to not being a 6x4 mixer, but really a 6x2 plus 2. And the reason I'm saying that is because in our monitor select switch rack, mechanically, you can only have up to 2 sources monitored at any one time. And they're in these pairs, so you can monitor the program 1, 2 buses, you can monitor the program 3, 4 buses, or you can monitor the aux and effects buses. But you can't monitor all 4. I have them locked down, but that's not what you're going to hear in the headphones. So, because the manual is clear that you can monitor any one of these or any 2, and 1, 2 takes priority over 3, 4, 3, 4 takes priority over the aux and effect buses monitoring. So what we have to do, since we've got a 4-track recorder and we've got 4 program outputs, but on the mixer we can only monitor 1 pair of those outputs at a time. So trying to find a way to be able to sum things and bus things and assign things to our 4 tracks in a way that's convenient and minimizes repatching requires some creativity with how we use the mixer and how we use one of the really neat features of the 234 which is its built-in 4x2 Q mixer. So we're going to use that Q mixer so that we can monitor all of our outputs from the mixer here and have control over all of those outputs. And while we can't monitor them all at once here with the inbuilt monitor section, we can supplement with the monitor mixer, really the 4x2 monitor mixer that's on the 234, and monitor that here. So that's the global premise of how I'm having things hooked up. So let's look at our inputs. What I'm doing for inputs, first of all, the track 1 through 4 outputs of the 234, those are here. I have those connected to channels 1 through 4 line inputs. And the reason I have those there is so that when it's time to mix down to make our stereo master from our 4 tracks, it's switch your source to line and mix away. In the meantime, if you ever had somebody else working with you and they needed a Q feed or monitor mix, then one of the nice things about the M106 is that you can select the line input as the source for the aux bus. With this switch in the up position, the source for this pot is whatever is selected as the input to the channel. With this down, the source for this pot is whatever's connected to the line input, regardless of where this switch is. So it gives you 2 independent sources there, and then you can, if you had your 4 tracks playing back, you could source those 4 tracks with the aux bus and set up a monitor mix for your talent that's working with you. So that's why I have track 1 through 4 outputs connected to channel 1 through 4 line inputs. Then you also talked about your condenser mic, dynamic mic, guitar pickup, these 3 things at least. And it sounds like there's some variability in when you use those, how you use them. So I would have those, like it sounds similar to what you're doing, connected to the mic inputs of however many channels you need, in this case 3. And those mic inputs are appropriate inputs for all of the sources that you had mentioned. And I'll explain this a little more in a second, but I would assign each of those inputs to the program 3-4 group, and then use the pan controls to isolate those to whatever tape tracks I want them to go to. The reason I have those inputs being summed to a pair of program groups is in case you have submixing, if you are wanting to take that guitar pickup and the condenser mic and submix them onto one track, you have that control here. When we hop over to channels 5 and 6, I have the output of the computer, which during tracking is GarageBand. I have that on the line inputs for 5 and 6. You indicated in your Going Mobile project thread that you were using the mic inputs, and according to the manual, the mic inputs are an appropriate input for line level sources below a certain level. So you're probably able to modulate the output from your computer so that it's a low enough signal that it's not overloading that mic input. So you can use them that way, but really, this is a line level device. It's line level output. Ideally, you would be connecting that to a line level input. When you have that connected to those mic jacks, you are sending this signal, the output of GarageBand or whatever is playing back on the computer. You're sending it through a host of electronic components that are part of that mic preamp that aren't necessary for preamplifying a line level source. So this is a more clean way to input it into the mixer. And as with the 234 track outputs, this is also your master recorder, so it might be nice to be able to set up cue mixes for playback from the computer and include that in a monitor mix for you or somebody. So that's what I have there. And then rather than assigning those to any of the program groups, since it sounds like you usually are working with a virtual bass track and a virtual drum track off of your computer, and that those are typically going to 2 of the tape tracks, I'm using the direct outputs for channels 5 and 6 for those 2 mono sources of the virtual bass track and virtual drum track. So, and this will make more sense in a moment. So these are assigned nowhere. The source is selected as line. Set your EQ to taste. Any effect send that you want to do, you can do that. And then these pan controls, really, since they deal with this assignment, these aren't really doing anything. And then the faders feed the direct outputs, and off to the 234 they go. So there's our inputs. As far as our outputs, actually I guess I already started on outputs. So here's 2 of your outputs for 2 of your tape tracks. I have direct out 5 and 6 going to tape track inputs 1 and 2 for tape tracks 1 and 2. Then I have the output of the program 1-2 pair going to the computer master recorder. So when you are mixing down, you would set these to line, because our outputs of the 234 are connected to the line inputs for channels 1 through 4. And then these would be assigned to program 1-2, pan accordingly to taste, and set levels accordingly. And then you would have your master mix right here, being output right here and off to the computer. Then during tracking, when I mentioned earlier about your microphones and your guitar pickup, if you assign these to program 3 and 4 and pan to isolate and to whatever bus that you're wanting to send whatever input to, and then that's over here on 3 and 4, and the outputs of program groups 3 and 4 go to tape tracks 3 and 4. So now we've populated 4 tape tracks. We have some flexibility for how we take these inputs and on the mic jacks and send those to wherever we want to send them. Now, remember, we can only monitor one pair at a time. But on the 234, when you have your output select as tape, so when this switch is in the up position, and you have this switch in the down position, on the Q mixer output, the Q output, the signals that are here is whatever you have, however you have these panned and these output level controls set. When you're overdubbing, anytime, if you have these switches set with this one up and this one down, anytime a switch is in the up position, like for track 1 or channel 1, if this switch is in the up position, the source here is the input for channel 1. So that goes to here, you pan left and right, and that goes to here, and I have the Q mixer output of the 234 connected to the sub-in 1 and 2. So remember I said we would use this for our mix down? Well, we're not mixing down yet. We're tracking and overdubbing, so you're not going to have any recording enabled on your computer. No opportunity for feedback loops. You're not monitoring the inputs here. So now during tracking and overdubbing, what is here is the output of the Q mixer to the program 1, 2 input, and then we can monitor 1 and 2. And now you have level control here. You can mono it if you want, and you've got your VU meters right here. And this is handy because then what you have here is a sum of all of the inputs to the 234, but also just by virtue of the record enable controls, that will automatically switch whether the source for this channel is the input or the tape track. And so that will be handy for overdubbing. Let's say you've already recorded tracks 1 and 2, so you recorded your GarageBand stuff, and now you want to start overdubbing. So this switch is up, this switch is down, this switch down, this switch down, this switch up, this switch up, and you press play. And now the source for channel 1 to the Q mixer is going to be the tape track, input, input. Now you're able to monitor what you have coming off of this stuff here, but you'll have the playback of tracks 1 and 2 here, and that those each go to this pan and level control here, and those feed here. And again, we're back to here on the sub 1, 2 inputs, which puts it here, and then you monitor here. So that's how we can get that's how we can monitor a sum of all of our outputs, combination of outputs from the mixer, combined direct outs, program outs. And we're bringing it in on 1 and 2 here during tracking and overdubbing. And then when it comes time to mix down, we're not using the Q mixer. We're going to be using the track outputs. So, man, I hope that makes some sense. But that's how I would do it. And there's probably a good chance that I would be using a patch bay. I think it might help, particularly with your effects patching, although maybe that's fairly stable. But again, that's on an insert cable, and that goes into the insert jack for whatever channel you want to compress. And then I've got the effects unit. The input to that is coming off of the effect out, and the output of the effects device is coming to the effect return. And then of course you're able to adjust the input level of that and assign that to any or all of the program groups and pan it accordingly. So hopefully that's not confusing things more, but that's how I would do it, and feel free to ask questions. Hope this helps.